10,000 Roman soldiers stood in silence in the narrow valley. No one spoke a word. They were waiting for death or victory, and there was only one choice. Before them, more than 100,000 Celtic warriors roared. The ground trembled beneath the feet of tens of thousands of men thirsting for Roman blood. The war horns blared like the roar of wild beasts. Wagons carrying Celtic families surrounded the battlefield. They had come to witness a victory. Only one side would leave this place alive. But how could 10,000 defeat more than 100,000? The answer began 17 years earlier. On an island the Romans called Britannia, an empire had set foot and changed everything on this land forever. In the year 43 AD, Emperor Claudius ordered an invasion. He wanted the military glory his predecessors had failed to achieve. 4 Roman legions, nearly 20,000 seasoned soldiers, landed on the southern coast. This was the most powerful war machine in the world. The Celtic tribes resisted fiercely, but they could not stop it. One region after another, one hill after another, fell into the hands of the Roman Empire. Rome possessed what the Celts did not: iron discipline, superior tactics, and military technology centuries ahead. Within just a few months, all of southern Britannia lay firmly under imperial control. A new province was established, and Rome needed a capital. Camulodunum, today known as Colchester, was chosen as the centre of power. The city of the conquerors rose from Celtic land. To assert its authority, Rome built a massive temple dedicated to Emperor Claudius, a symbol showing who the true master of this land was. Roman veterans were granted land to settle, and that land belonged to the natives. They were driven from their homes to make way for the invaders. But not every tribe was subdued by force. In the east, there was a tribe called the Iceni that managed to retain its independence. The Iceni chose a different path, becoming allies of Rome instead of fighting. It was a practical decision by a very intelligent king. King Prasutagus ruled the Iceni with rare wisdom. He maintained peace with Rome, and in return the tribe was allowed to keep its own laws. The arrangement seemed perfect. The Iceni had freedom, Rome had an ally, and no blood needed to be shed. But nothing lasts forever. At Prasutagus' side was his wife, a woman who would shake the entire empire. Her name was Boudica, and her name meant victory. The historian Cassius Dio described her as tall, with long red hair falling to her hips and a fierce gaze, the very image of a true Celtic warrior woman. The name Boudica meant victory in the Celtic language, a name full of power. But fate would play a cruel joke on her. They had 2 daughters, princesses of the Iceni tribe. Royal life seemed peaceful, but a dark shadow was drawing closer each day. Prasutagus left a will, dividing his kingdom between his 2 daughters and Emperor Nero. He believed this would protect his family after his death. It was a clever calculation on paper. His children would keep their land, and Rome would serve as a guarantor. But he did not understand the Romans. To Rome, the will of a barbarian king had no value at all. They were merely waiting for an opportunity, and Prasutagus' death was the opportunity they needed. In the year 60 or 61 AD, Prasutagus died. The king was gone, and with him vanished all hope of peace. And what happened next would ignite one of the bloodiest uprisings in the history of the Roman Empire in Britannia. News of the king's death reached the Roman officials. They did not come to offer condolences, they came to take everything the Iceni tribe had ever owned. Catus Decianus, the Roman procurator, saw a golden opportunity. A wealthy kingdom, a widowed queen, and no one left to protect them. To Rome, the will of a barbarian king had no legal value. They did not recognize female inheritance. Their law was the law of the strong. Catus ordered the confiscation of the entire Iceni kingdom. Not a part of it, but all of it, land, property, and even human dignity. The Iceni nobility were stripped of everything. Those once respected were now treated like slaves. Rome wanted to teach them a lesson, and that lesson was more brutal than anyone could imagine. Roman soldiers marched into the royal palace, where Boudica and her 2 daughters were staying. Boudica, queen of the Iceni, was dragged out before everyone like a criminal. No trial, no explanation, only humiliation. She was beaten with whips in front of her people. That was a punishment for slaves, not for a queen. Rome wanted to utterly disgrace her, but the most horrific act was still to come. Her two daughters, the Iceni princesses, were raped by Roman soldiers before their mothers' eyes. Tacitus recorded that the nobles were dispossessed and the king's relatives were treated like slaves. This was how Rome taught the natives their place. They wanted the Iceni to be afraid. They wanted other tribes to look on and tremble. But they misjudged one thing: hatred. The Iceni witnessed their queen being humiliated. They saw their princesses violated, and inside them a fire began to burn. Rome thought they had extinguished all hope. But they were wrong. They had not extinguished hope, they had ignited a fire that could not be put out. Boudica did not collapse. She rose from the ashes of humiliation. In her eyes there was no longer fear. There was only one thing left: fire. She stood before her tribe with the marks of the whip still etched on her back. She did not cry. She did not beg. She called for war and revenge. Tacitus recorded her speech, perhaps embellished by literature, but its spirit was clear. She spoke to them of humiliation and vengeance. Look at what they have done to your queen, to your daughters. Today it is me. Tomorrow it will be your wives, your children, yourselves. Fight or be slaves. There is no third path. The Iceni answered her call. Warriors from everywhere gathered under Boudica's banner. Thousands came. Then tens of thousands. News spread like wildfire. The neighbouring Trinovantes tribe heard it, and they came as well. The Trinovantes had also been oppressed by Rome. Roman veterans seized their land and drove them from their homes. They had their own reasons to hate Rome. Two tribes became one. Iceni and Trinovantes stood under Boudica's leadership, an alliance born of blood and tears. And so the fire erupted. A fire Rome could never have imagined. Boudica was not merely rebelling, she wanted to burn everything down. She wanted to destroy everything Rome had built on Celtic land. Every temple, every city, every invader. And she would begin at their heart. The first target was chosen: Camulodunum, the Roman capital, home to the Temple of Claudius, a symbol of oppression and conquest. Boudica's army marched on Camulodunum like a storm. According to Cassius Dio, as many as 120,000 may have taken part. That number may be exaggerated, as Roman historians often were. But whatever the true figure, they were larger than anything Rome had faced here. And here is the crucial point. Camulodunum, the provincial capital, had no walls. Rome was too confident. They believed no one would dare touch it. When news of the rebels arrived, the city panicked. Elderly, untrained Roman veterans desperately tried to organize a defense. They sent pleas for help to Catus Decianus, the very man who had caused it all. He sent back 200 soldiers, 200 to face a sea of people. Boudica's forces flooded into the city like a broken dam. The Romans were crushed, the city burned beneath the savage flames of revenge. The survivors fled to their final refuge, the Temple of Claudius. The symbol of conquest now became a place of desperation. They held out for 2 days inside the temple, 2 days waiting for reinforcements that never came. Then the doors were breached and everything ended in blood. The black ash layer from this destruction is still found in archaeological excavations today, physical proof of total annihilation. News of Camulodunum reached the 9th Legion Hispana. Its commander, Quintus Petilius Cerealis, decided to lead his forces to the rescue. The 9th Legion marched south at speed. It was one of Rome's most elite units, involved in the conquest from the very beginning. They did not know that Boudica was waiting for them. She had set a trap along the route, and when the 9th Legion entered it, the trap closed mercilessly. The legion's infantry was almost completely destroyed. A Roman legion, the symbol of invincible power, was shattered. Only Cerealis and his cavalry escaped, fleeing back to the fortress at Longthorpe. News of the disaster spread, and all of Britannia fell into panic. The governor, Suetonius Paulinus, was at that time in Wales campaigning against the island of Mona. He received the news and immediately turned back, but it was too late. The capital was destroyed, a legion annihilated. Boudica was advancing on Londinium with hundreds of thousands of bloodthirsty warriors. The situation was desperate. Suetonius rode hard to Londinium with his cavalry. He needed to assess the situation and make the most important decision of his life. Londinium, modern-day London, was then the largest commercial centre in Britannia. Merchants, craftsmen and families lived there. The population was around 30,000. They looked to Suetonius as their saviour. He was the governor, he would protect them. They believed this. But Suetonius looked around and calculated. He did not have enough troops. The city had no walls. To defend Londinium would mean losing everything, and he made the most ruthless decision of his career. He ordered Londinium abandoned. No defence, no relief. He told the people that anyone who wished to follow him could do so. Those who stayed would have to fend for themselves. Save the army to save the province, lose the city to preserve the empire. It was cold military logic. Without an army, there was nothing. But for the tens of thousands left behind, it was a death sentence. The elderly, pregnant women, children, those who could not follow. They watched Suetonius leave, taking with him their last hope. Boudica arrived, and Londinium shared the fate of Camulodunum. No one was spared. According to Tacitus, no prisoners were taken, no ransoms accepted. There was only killing and fire. The most prosperous trading city in Britannia was reduced to ashes. The black ash layer marks this destruction, and Boudica did not stop. Verulamium, modern St. Albans, the third city, was also burned to the ground, nothing left behind. The three greatest cities in Britannia were completely destroyed. According to Roman sources, 70 to 80,000 people were killed in the fury. The number may be exaggerated, as Roman historians often were. But the scale of destruction is real. Archaeology confirms the ash layers and the signs of devastation. Rome nearly lost Britannia. Never before had a rebellion inflicted such catastrophic damage on a province of the Roman Empire. But Suetonius did not flee. He was preparing, gathering his forces, searching for a place where numbers would no longer be an advantage for the enemy. He knew that fighting in cities or on open plains would mean defeat. But if he chose the right ground, 10,000 could defeat more than 100,000. And he found that place. A narrow defile, dense forest at his back, a valley ahead. A place where the enemy could come from only one direction. The decisive battle was about to begin, and one of the two sides would never leave that place. This was the moment of destiny for everyone. What happened in that narrow defile would determine the fate of an entire island for more than the next 3 centuries. No one could retreat. Suetonius gathered everything he had. The 14th Legion Gemina, the elite unit that had followed him from Wales. They were the backbone of his army. Added to that was a detachment of the 20th Legion Valeria Victrix. Not the entire legion, but enough to strengthen the force for the decisive battle, along with auxiliary troops from various units. In total, about 10,000 soldiers, that was all he had to face the storm. Suetonius sent an urgent order to the 2nd Legion Augusta in the southwest. Immediate reinforcement. This was a direct order from the governor. Povedius Postumus, commander of the 2nd Legion, received the order. He read it, considered it, and then did something no one could have expected. He refused. He was too afraid of Boudica's army. He had heard about Camulodunum, about the annihilation of the 9th Legion. He did not want to share their fate. Suetonius had to fight with what he had. 10,000 men against more than 100,000. A ratio of 1 to 10 or worse. But he possessed something Boudica did not: experience and terrain. He chose the battlefield with the calculations of a master. The exact location is unknown today. Historians have suggested Manchester, Highcross, or Churchstowe, but the description is clear. A narrow defile with dense forest covering the rear and flanks. In front lay an open valley, perfect terrain for a small force on the defensive. This tactic was not new. 540 years earlier, Leonidas had used it at Thermopylae. 300 Spartans against the Persian Empire. The narrow pass made numbers useless. The enemy could only attack from the front, and quantity ceased to be an advantage when there was no room. Leonidas had 300 Spartans. Suetonius had 10,000 seasoned Roman soldiers. The difference was that Leonidas lost and Suetonius had to win. The Roman army formed up, heavy infantry in the centre, auxiliaries on the flanks. Shield locked to shield, javelins ready, short swords at their sides. They stood silently in the defile, looking out toward the valley ahead. And that valley was gradually filling with people. A sea of humanity carrying death. Boudica's army arrived like a rising tide. According to Cassius Dio, it may have numbered as many as 230,000. Other estimates place it at 100,000. Whatever the correct number, they outnumbered the Romans by 10 to 20 times. From the defile, it looked like a sea of people stretching to the horizon. And it was not only warriors, their families came as well. Women, children, and the elderly sat in wagons surrounding the battlefield. They came to witness a certain victory, to see Rome crushed, to celebrate the day of Celtic freedom after so many years of oppression. The wagons were arranged in a circle behind the army, like a gigantic open-air theatre with the battlefield as the stage and families as the audience. Boudica stood on her war chariot, red hair flowing in the wind. Beside her were her 2 daughters who had suffered unspeakable humiliation. She released a hair from her cloak, an ancient Celtic divination ritual. The hair ran, and she read a favourable omen from its direction. She called upon the goddess Andraste, the Celtic goddess of victory. Today, she needed victory more than ever to avenge her dishonour. The Celtic war horn sounded like the roar of wild beasts. Hundreds of thousands shouted, the roar shaking the entire valley. The Celtic army charged. Like a tsunami, like a flash flood, tens of thousands surged toward the defile, where 10,000 Roman soldiers waited. The Roman soldiers stood still. No one moved, no one panicked. Iron discipline, forged through thousands of battles, held them firm like stone. Suetonius gave the order that no one was to move until the enemy entered javelin range, 30 meters. That was the deadly distance of the Pilum. The Celts came closer. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters. The Romans still did not move, hands gripping their javelins, eyes fixed straight ahead. Pilum! The command rang out. Thousands of javelins flew like a rain of iron, then plunged into the onrushing Celtic ranks with lethal speed. Thousands fell. But thousands more kept coming. They stepped over the bodies of their comrades, roaring and crashing into the Roman line like beasts. The 2 sides collided. The clang of metal, screams, groans, the sound of breaking bones. Hell opened in that narrow defile that day. The Romans held their formation. Shield pressed to shield, no gaps. Short gladii stabbed through the narrow spaces between the shields. The gladius was designed for confined spaces. Short, sharp, and deadly. Celtic longswords required room to swing, which they did not have. The Celts were packed together. They could not swing their swords or deploy formations. Numbers became a disadvantage when everyone was crammed into one place. The Romans began to advance. Step by step, the wedge formation cut like a blade through the chaotic and panicking Celtic ranks. Iron discipline met chaotic fury, and as so often in history, discipline prevailed. The Celtic formation began to collapse from within. The Celts panicked. Those in the rear saw those in front falling and began to turn back. They wanted to flee, but they could not, because the wagons of their families blocked the way. The wagons that had come to watch a victory now became an inescapable trap. A massacre followed. Not only warriors, but women, children, and the elderly on the wagons. The Romans slaughtered all. Tacitus said they spared not even animals. Tacitus recorded 80,000 Celtic dead, 400 Roman soldiers, a ratio of 200 to 1. The numbers may be exaggerated, but the disaster was real. The battlefield turned into a sea of blood. The wagons that had come to watch a victory were now filled with corpses. Boudica's dream of freedom died with her people. When darkness fell over the battlefield, there was no more roaring, only the groans of the dying and the stench of blood on the wind. The Roman army stood amid the sea of bodies, exhausted but victorious. 10,000 had defeated more than 100,000. Discipline had defeated numbers. Boudica watched it all from afar. She saw her daughters, her warriors, and her dream lying on the battlefield. There was nothing left to fight for. She turned her chariot and departed into the night. Behind her, the sound of ravens gathering began. The Battle of Watling Street was over, and Boudica had lost. No one knows exactly what happened to Boudica after the battle. Tacitus says she committed suicide by poison, choosing death over capture. But Cassius Dio tells a different story. He records that she fell ill and died. Two sources, two stories. The truth lies somewhere in the old pages of history. Either way, Boudica did not live to see what came next. Perhaps that was a mercy, because what followed was even more brutal. Suetonius carried out savage reprisals across the lands of the Iceni and the Trinovantes. Villages were burned, people were killed, and land was confiscated. The reprisals were so brutal that the Roman government in Rome itself had to intervene. They recalled Suetonius because his cruelty was creating further instability. As for Poenius Postumus, the commander who had refused to send reinforcements, when he heard of the victory achieved without him, he drew his sword and stabbed himself through the chest. He could not live with the shame of his cowardice. A self-chosen death, the end of a Roman soldier whose honour had been destroyed by his own fear. Rome would rule Britannia for another 350 years until AD 410, when the empire collapsed and its troops withdrew. One battle, one afternoon, decided the fate of an entire island for more than 3 centuries. That is the weight of the Battle of Watling Street. Boudica lost. But was she truly defeated completely? In history, the victors write the books. Yet sometimes they write to honour the defeated. Tacitus and Cassius Dio, 2 Roman historians, recorded her story with respect. Their enemy, but also a hero. And here lies the greatest irony of this story. The name Boudica means victory in the Celtic language, the tongue of her ancestors. The woman named Victory lost the most decisive battle of her life. Fate played a cruel joke on that name. But history has its own way of correcting injustices, and what happened nearly 2,000 years later would prove that in an unexpected way. Today, in Westminster, the heart of London, there stands a massive bronze statue. A woman on a war chariot, her hair streaming in the wind. It is the statue of Boudica, standing proudly beside the Houses of Parliament. Gazing out over the River Thames, the river that flows through the city she once burned, the very city she had reduced to ashes, now honours her as a national hero. Once an enemy of Rome, now a symbol of England itself. She lost the battle, but she won in memory. Nearly 2,000 years later, she is still remembered. Those who defeated her have been forgotten. Perhaps that is the truest victory. Not on the battlefield, but in the hearts of later generations. The victory of memory. History is written by the victors. But sometimes it is the victors themselves who write to honour the defeated. That is Boudica's final lesson.